Okay, good. So, I'm not going to introduce the first speaker, Reinhard Wagner. So, this Reinhard guy, he has given more talks on project management than all the people I know almost put together in more countries. He's visited 120 countries. Can you believe that? And I think they're inventing new countries just so they can ask him to speak there. So he's the ex-director of IPMA, the guy that I mentioned about. And his biggest thing that he's done in life, when I asked him what's his biggest accomplishment, he said, climbing Kilimanjaro. And I think he did that in 2008, was it? Great. His biggest issue in life is finding shoes that fit size 48 feet. So if there are some Dutch people here, because you've got tall people in Holland, you can go and talk to them as well. And I first met you, Reinhard, when we were both invited to give a talk in the Middle East at a conference. The conference was called the International Project Management Conference, and I think you and I were the international part, which were allowed in. So your title of the talk is, no, the first word, of course. I tried this word and I didn't do it. So I'm going to call it Project Management in the Public Sector of Germany. Just come on stage because I take liberty. Go for it.
Thanks, Frank. Nice introduction. Projectification. And that's my topic. I'm very delighted to be here and speak about it because that's my life. My life is a project management life in public as well, also in private sector in Germany, but I also travel quite a lot. So I think it's also interesting to see and compare what's going on in the countries. And so my talk is about the public side of what we do in Germany, and there's a lot going on. I will not speak about PM² because it's also not much used now in Germany, but I think there's a need for more PM² in Germany, and I hope that also this initiative may swap into Germany and help the public administration also to move on. Before I start my journey of what is going on now in the public sector, I think it's also wise to look back in our history. And it's interestingly that we find traces of projects back into the 16th century. A Spanish author wrote poems about projectors in Denmark. And it's not a very pleasing story because all those projectors failed to help the king on a small island. Daniel Defoe wrote an essay upon projects already in the 17th century, and he claimed that the 17th century has been a projecting age. And it was about projects to help society. It was a health system. It was infrastructure projects, but it was also something where only a few people dared to do it. And he wrote about what is necessary to do projects. And he said, first, common sense. Second, honesty. And third one, ingenuity. Because he described also those projects being very difficult and only a few people are really able to do so. And he was also such a kind of a person. And so he stranded also on a small island, Guernsey Island. And so he wrote Robinson Crusoe 8 years later. Okay? So, and you will see also I had the subtitle of Heroic Man, because it's all about men doing projects at this age. And also if you look into Germany, we had the first public administrator, Johann Heinrich Gottlob von Justi, already in the 18th century. He was called a Kameralist. And he was writing a lot about how to do things in the public sphere. And he was talking a lot about projects, not project management, because that word did not exist in these ages. And he even claimed that all people at this time were project makers or projectors. Okay, was a very interesting label of how did that people are labeled. And you see finally a Bavarian, I'm from Bavaria, a Bavarian painter, Karl Spitzweg, who painted that, what you see here on the right. And it's very interesting. Also this kind of projector or project maker is very self-confident, okay. But look at his assistant. That assistant is a lot scared because there's no connection between the balloon and the gondola. So projects were about a lot of hot air balloons, okay, and the projector is in the gondola and still confident that he will make it. So very interesting, these kind of narratives of doing projects. And now if we switch to the 1950s in the aftermath of the Second World War, we inherited something that is nowadays called project management, and it was built on operations research. It was basically very rational, very mathematical. So how to do projects by using Gantt charts and PERT diagrams and critical path method. So you hardly find any human in that approach. And still, if you look into methodologies, you will find this kind of philosophy or concept, which is one of the problems that we do projects based on that kind of methodology. Okay, and this is why also in the 1990s then a rethinking project management initiative started to also look into various perspectives. So look into projects from very different angles. And I'd like just to mention those three on the top. Now, people came into the game because, sure, projects are people doing projects with people, for people. And that also means that we need to deal projects in a social way. And also, in my sphere, I'm also an engineer, people always complain about politics in projects. And we hate politics. We don't want to intervene into any of these kind of politics. But projects are political because politics means there are interests behind. And so this is why also in the ISO 21500 we introduced stakeholder management to the discipline of project management because it's dealing with people, elaborating on their interests and making that happen in the project. So projects are political and we need to deal with that. And finally, also on the left, you see this change. And nowadays, we know that every project that we do, whether it's an IT project, an infrastructure project, or an organizational change, that's easy. There's a change and a transformation component in it. And we, as project manager, we need to deal with that. And right now in Germany, we do a lot of big infrastructure projects, and there's a lot of change. But the infrastructure project managers are not trained to deal with change. So this is why also in the IPMA, ICB, we have a competence element which is called change and transformation. So it means we need to understand what is change and how to do and realize change in such a project. So it's different perspectives, and we need to inject that into our way of thinking of project management. Now, and finally, also it's very interesting to see that especially in the Scandinavian countries, Rolf Lundin was very instrumental in speaking about project as forms of an organization, a temporary organization. Temporary, so sure, it starts and an end, but it's also a big highlight on the team, so people working in that project and doing, let's say, a transition, a transformation, a change. That's at the heart. And so project management turned also not into a methodology only, but in an organizational science and organizational view perspective. And I think that's very important now if we understand and work on projects, especially also in the public sector. Now, I will speak about Germany. I don't go through all these issues here, but you understand or may understand that Germany is in the middle of Europe with a lot of interfaces. And that's very important also for our infrastructure projects or energy and other projects that we have. Here's nine neighboring countries. And that has an impact on the way we do projects in our country. We have a very strong economy. And that's not only important because it's a very large economy, but most of the projects are done in the economy. So the private sector has a lot of experience in doing projects, also very large or mega projects. And it's kind of a competitor to the public scene, also doing projects now. And I will come back to that relationship. We have Mittelstand, so that's very important, 95% or so or more. Are very small companies, very innovative, very dynamic, very collaborative, and that's what is fueling also the projectification, which means they are doing a lot of projects in a very dynamic or agile way, and that's helping our economy to always kind of be competitive for export and other things that we do. And finally, the second last bullet, we are very complex. We are a federal state with 4 levels of public administration, from the national through the state. And there's one very specific state like mine, Bavaria, is always Freistaat, okay? Something special, not only the beer and the lederhosen, but it's also from a governmental perspective, always very special. And then going down to the districts, down to the municipal level. So it's complex, and that has a lot of impact on the projects we do, because if you do and I will show it in the next slide, a big power autobahn from the north to the south, you need to deal with all those levels. And you always need to see who is now in the decision making, at what time you need to approach the municipal level, the state level, and the national level to move your project forward. So that's a bit a complication in our country. So we love democracy and this federal structure, but for projects, it's a hell. Okay, so this is why I think it's important to mention that, and I will come back to that. What does that make with the public administration project management? We have a lot of challenges. I think all of you from your countries or your country's perspective, we have a bit the same. I'd like to highlight that Germany is very much affected by the climate crisis or the climate effects. Not only the flooding, what you see, we had very severe floodings in the western part of Germany, with a lot of destruction. Now projects are going on to rebuild, to reconstruct that. But also from an agricultural perspective, the last few years were too dry, and that has a lot of impact on agriculture and infrastructure as well. So shipping on the Rhine was not possible during a few weeks in the summer of this year, and it will be increasingly also in the next years. So there's a lot of impacts, and if you go on the bottom line, that's the refugee crisis. We had the first one in 2015, with the more than 1 million Syrians came in 2015 and 16. And now this year we had the same from Ukraine, more than 1 million people. Very different people coming in 15 and now in 2022, but that's another story. But I'd like to highlight that also public administration was incapable of dealing with this influx of people. And only the, let's say, initiative of private people, of individuals on a community-based level, they help those people. Like they help also for the poor to feed, we call it Tafel. I think that the government would not be able to cope with these kind of challenges only as a government, but it was together with the private initiatives of the people from community level, state level, we were able to really to bring those people into housing, also feed them, train them language. This is German, very difficult, but also bring them into the job market and integrate them in a way so that they are not idle, sitting somewhere and being frustrated, etc. So that's also a good example how societal problems now challenge the public administration to do projects in order to cope with these kind of challenges. And these examples are, let's say, a really bad experience because it showed that our public administration at this moment is not capable of doing that. And for example, the German Project Management Association, for example, in 2015, helped the governmental levels to develop a master plan for integration of the refugees. We put our project management expertise to the table to help those governments to cope with this influx of so many people. Okay, so we as project managers can help the public administration with our knowledge and experience really to deal with this. there are many other things I could now talk about. Our country is in transition. I remember the German reunification. It was a very exciting moment also for my family, because I'm from the Black Forest, but my mother is from the East, and because of my military background, we were never able to visit her relatives in the eastern part. So 1990, my first encounter with the Eastern Germans. This German reunification, and I talked about that in South Korea, because they're also hoping to reunite, triggered thousands of projects. Because we need to reconnect the infrastructure, the highways, railways, waterways, gas, etc. So there was a lot of projects, and still we have the Bundesverkehrswegeplan, which is a plan into 2030 that defines hundreds of billions of euro that are being invested in autobahns and roads and railways and waterways and so on from the national level. So it's national budget mainly, but also on a state level and down to the communities and so on. This is a huge portfolio of projects. It is now the fifth of this kind of Verkehrswegeplan, which triggers a lot of projects. Okay, and so this is why it's important. And now I could speak all these things. I think you are very familiar. I'd like to pick one, and that's Energiewende, because that's also something that's on the political agenda of our government. You see the ambitions here on the right box. To change into renewable, because we know we have now the Green Party in the government, and they are pushing very much to go out of nuclear, out of coal, and hopefully also out of gas. But now you see we are not yet there. So there needs to be a lot of projects, a lot of initiatives being implemented in order to do so. And it's not only electricity, but there's also a lot of other things to do. And I'll just show you one example. I was involved in that, and it's still ongoing. It's the biggest project we do right now, 7 billion euro. It's a power line from the north to the south. It's built by TenneT, a Dutch company, and TransnetBW. So they are responsible for building this power autobahn from the north, because in the north we have this wind power. And there's even a link to the North Link, which brings the hydro energy from Norway down to Hamburg. And Hamburg is the pickup point because our industry is in the south, and all the most of the nuclear power plants were in the south. So we need now to switch that into renewable energy. And so you see the cables. There will be 2 high voltage cables digged into the soil, and this is heavily complex because we are very dense populated here. And you need all these permitting processes and planning and so on. So it's a huge endeavor, and we hope that by 2027 or 2028, more likely it will be concluded. Most of the money is from the government put into TenneT. So yesterday I heard that the government also considers to purchase TenneT, or at least the German part. So that's very interesting now, so that the state invest into these kind of companies, but you see it's critical infrastructure, and therefore the performance of those projects and the performance of the investments into those projects, and TenneT plans to have in the next 10 years 30 billion euro invested in these kind of power lines and grids. I think that's very important that this really works. Now, projectification. Sorry, it's a French word, actually. Christoph Mittler invented that word. And it's a bit the combination of the number and importance of projects increases, but there's also some kind of transformation in it. So it does something with the parties that is doing those projects, okay? I will come back to that. And Frank already mentioned those numbers. We did a survey in 2013, actually, it was performed to do a look into the utilization of projects in various sectors. And what we found out at this point, that the projectification is growing, and it is still growing today. In the beginning, it was more 4%, now it's 3%, and I will show you later a bit a number that is also between 2 and 3%, so per year it is growing. So if you now calculate that GDP number, 40% with our GDP, which is now close to 4 billion euro, you can imagine what huge number or volume is processed in projects. And PMI published recently a number of how many project managers there should be in Germany, more than 1 million. They don't have proper research, but still this is a huge number, which all of them need to be trained, they need to be maybe certified or experienced in doing projects. So it's a huge task for all of us to make them performant in doing these kind of projects. But if you now look deeper into this data, and I think that's also interesting for you because I don't know that there's a survey in Belgium. You should do that. Maybe the numbers are comparable. But here we see that, especially in the sectors where we are good at, manufacturing or producing industry, the projectification is far ahead. So even now the numbers are exceeding the 50% of what they do. It's also the time spent in your daily life to do projects. But now if you go down the trenches to agriculture, agriculture is not small, but also not big important in our economy. But you still see projects do not really play a big role. And I know from Mexico, Mexican government is investing for all the campesinos to run a level D of IPMA certification. So they train the campesinos, the farmers, to use project management to run their farm in a more efficient way. I think that's a good example that shows also the differences in infrastructure, in industry structure and the utilization of projects. And now what I've highlighted in red is our public administration is behind. And that's also interesting if we now compare those numbers with other countries. And there was our colleague Yvonne Chopper published that with colleagues from Norway and Iceland because they did the same analysis. And you see even from the industry structure and from the percentages that Germany is lagging behind what concerns the public sector. Iceland is ahead, and I have numbers from Croatia, they are even 40%. And I have numbers from China, they are above 50% because the Chinese government pushes everything through projects. So they have a project-driven government and policy. So it means nearly all the initiatives, whether it's in water or electricity or so, is pushed through projects. So projects play a much more important role in those countries than in our country. And this is why we have this data, because it's now something we can take to our government and talk about it and say, you need to do something about it, okay? So this is why we did this analysis. And there's even in the literature, and I'm not speaking much about that, but you see also the labels that we are now more and more turning towards a project society or projectized society, which means that we pick up that kind of project idea from industry and apply it also in the public domain, but also in the private sector, in sports events or arts and culture and so on, and apply what is called project management, okay? And that's very interesting to see, and even Anders Fogh Jensen from Denmark, he claims that nowadays everyone is doing projects. I had a nice talk, he's a philosopher and he comes from the more social domain, and he's saying projects is just networking and doing something together. And it's also a very nice perspective. He's not talking at all about project management, but about project as networking activities and getting things done together. I click this open because, back. You see a few definitions. What we now call the projectification of society is the diffusion of projects, of this phenomenon of doing projects in all the sectors, all the areas of our society. And in Germany, there was a very famous ad of a do-it-yourself company. If you want to do your garden, do it as a project, okay? So it was in the big news and big advertisement, do it do your project, okay, and do it yourself. And that's very fancy. So we see, if you open the newspapers or the TV or social media, people in sports, in arts and crafts and so on, they are speaking about projects. Every event is a project. So it's a fancy word. Sometimes it's also even a buzzword now. So that's also difficult for researchers to get a grip on what is a project and what is something else. So that's very difficult. But you see that projectification of society basically means that we do projects, and that is also changing the society, changing the organization, changing the public administration, because now they need project managers. They may need a project management office. They may need a portfolio management, terms they have not spoken about 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Okay, so project management is more and more institutionalized in those organizations, so organizations are transforming. And this is why also the projectification is showing that it is doing something with the organization. Now, I did last year a survey in Germany. It's also published on GPM's website. Now more with the focus on the society, not only economy, but also the rest of the society. And as you can see, the trend of projectification is still ongoing. The growth is now between 2 and 3%, so it is growing, still expanding. Some say, is it expanding indefinite? I would say no. There will be a certain level of saturation because not everything is a project. So the interesting question for researchers now is, so when do we reach this level? So, and you see in some not yet developed countries or developing countries that they are having a very fast growth of projectification, but some countries that are already, let's say, at the outset of the development, you see also the curve is flattening. Now, we have climate crisis, a lot of new challenges coming, maybe that's speeding up the projectification again. We don't know. I think that's a matter, we should look deeper into that. But what is highlighted below here, you see in Germany, this is very obvious that we have a huge gap between the private sector and the public sector in applying projects and project management thinking and working. And that's a big problem. I will show you why. But also leisure, sports, culture, civic engagement. So I talked with Fridays for Future or inclusion projects. So on all levels they do projects. But if we now start speaking about PM² project management methodology, they would ask, what is that? Do I need management? They organize projects. Friday for Future, they also organize their demonstrations, okay? And it's very interesting to see how professional they do that. But if you now do a time schedule or a risk analysis, they would just laugh at you and say, what is that? Why do I need something like that? Okay, you can start a dialogue with them, but they say, I need the basics, the really foundational things to do in projects, and that's just enough for me. And here a few drivers. What is interesting that the societal challenges in Germany are somewhere in the middle. So again, in my country, it's more economy, the professional context. So all this complexity and innovation and efficiency pressures. So that's the voice of the economy. And nowadays we hear more and more the voice of the non-economy sectors also phrasing, okay, we need more professionalism. And that's especially in the public sector. Because, yeah, you know, we have a lot of news about failed projects in Germany. And I will not speak about the Berlin airport, but I was in the reform commission of the German government between 2013 and 15. We had a reform commission. We talked about these three on the top. And it was basically due to the incompetence of the public sector to really deal with the complexity of these huge projects. So the mayor of Hamburg, for example, just said, it will be very easy, 80 million, that will be the full cost of that Elbphilharmonie. And we don't need a private company, we just do the planning and everything on our own. So he chartered his own administrators to do so. And you know the end of the story, 800 million, just only 2 years delay, but factor 10 in cost. So, so not listening to the economy, to the private industry, because they knew, and I said in that reform commission, they made a lot of money out of that. So this is why the private industry is a bit a competitor of the public administration, because if the public administration is not good in managing this kind of project, private industry will make a lot of money. Okay, and that's taxpayers' money. And I think nobody of us paying taxes wants that. So this is why we need to improve the way we do projects. And now we have a 100 billion euro thing for the military. I have my doubts. I know that office that is responsible for all these purchasing stuff, and I say they are not capable of processing this money. So we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem, okay? I'm not speaking about the other ones, but I think there's a lot to do. So now, why do we have that problem? Maybe the whole public administration in Germany has a specific historical background. I think that's also to be taken into account. It's more based on routine, on, let's say, long-term thinking of, we have Beamte, people that have their lifetime job with the government, and they have not a short-term contract with a short notice period. So, you know, I just made some bullets here of potential causes, permanence versus temporality. So the public administration still is thinking in a long-term perspective, in doing it on a routine basis. They love stability, safeguarding. So it means, yeah, I'm not responsible for it. So I'm just administering a project. And that is not working, as we all know in the sphere of project, that we need an entrepreneurship behavior, that we need adaptability or agility, that we also need to understand that there's an uncertainty, a risk in projects, and there's a lot of risk in projects. But it needs a mentality, an attitude of people to deal with that and act, let's say, in an unaccountable manner. And this is what I still find in the German public administration. This kind of mentality is not there. I do workshops in Berlin. I will also next week do another workshop on that. We need a cultural change. I think that's very much important. And what are the effects of that, or the impact? Industry has a competitive advantage. I think that's something that we could exploit. So my plea also the Reform Commission, and now with the partners I'm working with in Germany, is utilize what's known in the industry. Do public-private partnership models more. It's very hardly used in Germany. So PPP projects, there are disadvantages, sure, but there's also the advantage of injecting the knowledge, the experience from the private industry into the public domain and making use of that. Projects are increasingly seen as rivaling the administrative task. So it means maybe we have two sorts of people in public administration, and somehow we also started to do that. I'm right now working with a public agency in Berlin who has, let's say, the more administrative part, which is in a different location. And in Berlin, that's the head office for a very large mega project. And that's good on the one hand, but they still have difficulties to find synergies between the two parts. Okay, so, and that's my role right now, to see how can we, let's say, synchronize the traditional line and long-term roles with the project function. So, but we need to start somewhere, and I think that's a good start to have islands of projects and build them up, and also make the culture a bit more project-oriented, so that the others see, okay, it's not that difficult. Let's follow that good example. And what we also see in my country, at least, that politicians increasingly see, oh, projects is cool. I have a 4 or 5 years term, So I want that project to be finished in that term, and I, at the end, be at the stage and collect all the appraisals. And now the administrators say, oh, Jesus, that's not able to be finished in these 4 or 5 years term, so it may overlap to the next term. And then the politicians say, oh, then I'm not interested because I don't want to feed my follower or successor. So you see, it's a bit also a competition between the political side and the administrator side. And so this is also where we need to bridge both sides so that they understand, the politicians, what is a project, how do we do projects, and what kind of role do they have in order to help the project to become successful. Not like the Hamburg mayor saying that's just 80 million and we'll do an iconic building and it will be finished at the end of my term. No, it was not finished at the end of his term. But he was gone. So the blame was then on the city administration. And to bridge both sides, because both sides are important to make a project a success, the political side, but also the administration side, and I think that's important. So who's instrumental for the projectification? And I did my research looking for the role of the associations, the project management association. And I thought, GPM, yes, that's the main driver for projectification. And you see, no, it's fourth. And public authorities are fifth. So they are not really instrumental, they are not helping, they are not supporting projectification. But then the interesting point was, who else is doing that? Exemplary companies, entrepreneurs. Now, remember, I said we have 99% of small and medium-sized companies, family-owned, and very entrepreneurial. And we have some iconic entrepreneurs also in our country, like that guy. Okay, and he came like a superstar, a rock star in 2020, and he announced, oh, in 18 months we will start producing our cars here in Grünheide, which is a facility very close to the Berlin airport, by the way. He did not finally get it done in 18 months, but as you can see on that slide, in March 2022, so 2 years, he was able to set up a factory and produce the first cars. Impossible in Germany. Impossible. So now the question is, how did that guy do that? We need to be careful to look at Elon Musk, and I think you read a lot about Elon Musk now, his role in Twitter and so on. His role here was not different to what he's doing at Twitter. So I was also a bit engaged in that project, and he fired a project manager, I think, twice at least in that time. So it's very difficult to work for him. But let's just look into the, let's say, success criteria. He himself convinced the people that this is possible. And in Germany, they all say, boy, if Elon Musk, who was able to do these rockets and Hyperloop and other things, then he also will be possible to do that here in Germany. So that was one. Then the narrative of he being innovative and passionate and so on and so forth. He was also taking a very high risk because he got the permission in February 2022. If that permission would have not been given, he could have scrapped the whole factory. Okay, but he decided we'll do it, and in the end, okay, we need to scrap it if it's not given. But what did he do with the administrator? The administrator did not dare to say no to his permission. So he built up this kind of expectation through, let's say, personal engagement. He was sleeping in his factory and working very hard and so on, and pushing people and so on. He built also an interest among the public. That also was very important. He also did a lot of, let's say, marketing, a lot of nice festivals, invited people to come, and it was bratwurst for free and things like that. So the momentum was on his side. So all the marketing and influencing all the top politicians was a well-done job. So now, is that a model to follow? Yes. And our now Minister of Economy and Climate Protection, Robert Habeck, he said, in view of this Russian attack to Ukraine, we need to have now LNG terminals. We need to have 3, and they need to be up and running within 9 months. And the first one will be running in the next weeks. So, but what I also need to say, there was a special legislation. So they reduced the kind of regulations you need to comply with, like in the Elon Musk case. So that's hidden. Nobody talks about that. But Germany has a lot of regulations, and in these kind of cases, they try to reduce and suppress those regulations. Because they see the project is of importance, it's critical for our country and so on. And also Volkswagen, which is the main competitor of Tesla in my country, they need at least 3 years to build up such a gigafactory. Now they are pushing it also down to 2, maximum 2.5 years. Okay? So you see, these kind of projects puts a lot of pressure on the other players in the market, and this is why I'm saying projects is the new normal for all of us in our society, and specifically for the public administration. Even Boltanski and Capello, they wrote that as, let's say, a future scenario, and they speak about a projective city or a society. And public administration should co-create with all partners, utilize what's already there, also copy the kind of behavior, entrepreneurship behavior I showed you, and make this happen. But for that, we need a project-friendly culture. We need, let's say, the spirit of projects from the Daniel Defoe's time, doing something specific to the good of our society, utilizing what we have now at methodology and processes and tools, and help our society with all these challenges that we have nowadays to become better. Thanks for your interest.
Thank you very much, Reinhard. Any questions from the audience? And your microphone is on the left-hand side. Just lift up the cap and you'll see it there. I've got one question while they're thinking about it. What was the government's response when you showed them that diagram about their projectification in other countries and they're falling behind? So when you went to the German government, what did they say? Jawohl?
No. Can I do it, the movement?
Yeah.
No, one good thing is that the government stays out of business. That's, on the one hand side, a good thing. Because business is, let's say, free for their own decision making, and there's not much influence into the business. But on the other hand, public administration is too much on an island. And this is why I again say we need to find occasions where we meet and exchange. And this is why the German Project Management Association has started an action plan which brings together private industry, the GPM, the German Project Management Association, and the Interior Minister, which is responsible, who is responsible for project management in the government, and so they are exchanging.
Okay.
But there is some progress, but...
A little bit, yeah. Good. Thank you. Any questions from the audience? You mentioned GPM.
Yes.
So it's an organization which is fully focused on German project management, is that it? Or government?
It was founded in 1979. It's the German Project Management Association. It's the professional body of project management in
And how many
Germany.
other countries have such organization to shove the discipline of project management in their country? Do you know?
In IPMA, there are 72 right now organized. I think there are more. But the majority differs very much. So we have some associations in, let's say, Cambodia. They are just starting. And they're very much interested in learning how this kind of projectification, how they can support that projectification. And we typically start with education and training. And there are some very experienced, like the UK, APM, and their initiatives also on the public side with a lot of standards and also training and certification programs. So there's a range from to, and I would say Germany is somewhere in the middle.
Good, thank you very much. You also mentioned that agriculture